Welcome to the Red Bean Podcast, New Orleans edition. This is your host, Mr. Toad.
And I'm Dr. Frog.
I really wanted you to see this movie, and I'm glad we finally got to watch it.
I've never seen this movie prior to today.
The title of the film is From Beyond, and it's a H.P. Lovecraft-inspired movie.
Yeah, so I guess this was a movie made off of a short story.
I'm assuming so. Yeah. It was about the inspiration of it, but I think for our audience, this is definitely something I want to read the back of the box here to give some people an idea of this horror, sci-fi, fantasy adventure. H.P. Lovecraft's classic tale of suspense became a grisly amygdala of sex, shock, and satire. In the hands of the creators of Reanimator, and now armed with shocking, never before seen footage and special features, and on a Blu-ray for the first time. We're reading the back of the box.
Yeah.
The story is
what's on the box? The
Resonator, a powerful machine that can control the sixth sense, has killed its creator and sent his associates into an insane asylum. But when a beautiful psychiatrist becomes determined to continue the experiment, she unwittingly opens the door to a hostile parallel universe and to the deviant behavior within the human psyche.
Deepest, darkest desires.
With its victims becoming creatures who feed on and become aroused by human brains.
Yeah.
The Resonator is the ultimate man-made monster, and now something gone horribly wrong, and no one can turn it off.
I like that they describe the Resonator as a monster. And what it is, maybe it's a comment on the monster on the other side that the Resonator gives us access to, but maybe it's it's making a comment on the technology itself being a monster, not the monster that we see ourselves in the reflection of. I hope it's okay to go into spoiler territory.
Yeah.
To set up the scene, there's the real world or whatnot, what we consider the real world. And then this Resonator seems to give us access to a world that's there, but we don't see, and maybe it doesn't necessarily see us. And it seems very much focused on the pituitary gland and emotions.
Pineal gland.
Pineal gland. Wait, what's it?
The pineal gland.
Pineal gland.
Pineal gland.
Oh, is it pineal?
Pineal.
Oh, pineal. Yeah.
Yep, it's the pineal gland, also known as the pineal body.
Oh.
It's a small endocrine gland in the brain
endocrine
of
system,
most vertebrates. In the darkness, the pineal gland produces melatonin and serotonin derived from hormones, which modulate sleep patterns following the Duralian cycle, which is like your perception of time, of lighting, and it basically tells you have this cycle of knowing when it's dark or light outside.
Yeah, and it seems to also cover things like arousal or hormones or something.
Yeah, and it deals with temperature fluctuations, weather changes. So there's a certain type of perception the pineal gland.
So that makes sense because they represent seeing from the quote-unquote monster's view as a sort of night vision of heat, where you can see, the sort of different temperatures around the room.
Yeah, that was the one aspect they showed.
I didn't even put that together till now.
Yeah, and the pine cone. One of the reasons the shape of the gland resembles a pine cone, which gives it its name. So the pineal gland is kind of shaped like a pine cone, so that's why they call it that.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the thing that they sometimes would leave the body. Sometimes they'd show you a little pineal gland.
The pineal gland is located in the epithalamus near the center of the brain between two hemispheres, tucked in a groove where the two halves of the thalamus join.
Wonderful.
It is one of the neuroendocrine secretory circumventricular organ in which capillaries are most permeable to solids in the blood. So that's what I was saying. When the machine would turn on, the resonator, you could kind of see metallic objects moving around, and I kept thinking, maybe it's affecting the blood that's stimulating. It's like it's making the blood become
something with magnetism.
There are objects floating around for sure, but I think our audience is probably confused.
Maybe we should start from the beginning.
Maybe we'll just tell the plot. Let's go into the plot. So, scientist Dr. Edward Ptorius has developed the Resonator, a machine that allows whoever's within range to see beyond normal perceptible reality. His assistant, Dr. Crawford Telegast, activates the machine and sees strange creatures in the air. He is bitten by one of them. He notifies Ptorius about the machine's functionality. Ptorius, driven by lust for power and knowledge, turns the machine on and becomes mad with the feelings of the Resonator.
And so that they represent this seeing the other side or the other world as a sort of pink filter over the screen, which I thought was a great way to indicate to the audience that you're seeing things that aren't necessarily normal.
Well, one thing that I really like about this idea of this machine being turned on and the pineal gland being stimulated, it kind of goes into this aspect of there are these creatures that are around us all the time, but we don't see them. But when we turn this machine on, then we see them. But the issue is, if we see them, they see us.
Oh, so that's why they were saying don't recognize it or move.
Yeah, don't move, don't shake your hand, don't look at them. It
almost reminds me of Murio-chan, that one horror yokai Japanese anime where when you see a spirit, you're not supposed to recognize it, otherwise you'll anger it. If you recognize that it exists, and it recognizes that you know that it exists.
It has a runtime of 86 minutes, which I actually really liked.
I liked. It was short and sweet. It was a wonderful short story that was very well transcribed to the screen.
Good time management. Really good time.
The pacing of the film was great.
I didn't feel at any moment when you're watching the movie like, oh, okay, come on, let's get on with it. I felt like everything was moving.
I was prepared for filler, no filler. I was ready to go to the next scene, and they really kept it moving along. It was a bit of an action movie, somewhat. Yeah. I got that feel, even though it was horror. I got sometimes the feeling that it was a lot of action-oriented things. What do we need to do now? Might have been a question that the group asks themselves.
Now we're going to return back to the plot.
So we'll go to the plot first.
The Resonator malfunctions at full power, causing Crawford to panic and flee. When the police arrive, they find Ptorius decapitated, yet no blood. Crawford is arrested for murder.
So, just to clarify, Ptorius is this main inventor, and then Crawford, which, by the way, this is a good advertisement against graduate school. He's a physics graduate student who's working under Ptorius.
Yeah.
And he sort of is an assistant that helps him carry out his experiments. And
he's like, this guy's a genius, but
through this first Resonator use.
Yeah, but then we have Ptorius that has kind of a dark...
it's a little infected being bitten, too.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, that's not too good being bitten by a creature from an alternate reality that's actually within our reality.
I would not recommend.
Yeah, turning on a machine like this is probably not advisable.
No, it's not a fun weekend activity.
No, I just think that it's just too much trouble, too much... It's one of these things where it's like... You notice there's no good from some development, and sometimes I think it's perfectly acceptable for an inventor to destroy his machine if he thinks it's going to cause more harm than good.
Oh yeah. No, there's lots of it's funny. This reminds me of a David Mitchell and Robert Webb sketch where they were talking about Dr. Doom, who created
Dr. Von Doom,
who created the Doom device. And the military is interested, saying, oh, what is it? It's a laser. And they say, oh, what is this Doom device? And he says, well, you can scan any item in the grocery store, and it'll tell you the approximate price and caloric information of the sample. And so, well, what's the military application? It's a Doom device. So, oh, well, that's just because I'm named Dr. Doom. But they always make fun of this, the scientist that creates this dangerous weapon,
And it's like, the scientist who has the most experience with it is basically telling everybody, don't play around with this thing.
Yeah, there's a little bit of forbidden fruit, imagery going on here saying, do we want the knowledge of what's beyond? In some ways, what its effect on us is it showed the darker side of humanity. There were themes of, sadism. There were themes of what uncontrolled desire does. It sort of undermines the rationality and humanity of people if it's too robust. Yeah, it brings up our animalistic nature. I think that there was a little bit of a forbidden fruit. Like, do we really want to know this about ourselves? Who we really are? Or, the dark side of, if we put a pink filter on the screen. Which, by the way, the camera work was amazing. There were close-up shots. What I also like is there's a lot of heaviness.
Yeah.
And a lot of body horror and a lot of suspense and drama. And they did a great job in the pacing of punctuating this with humor, such as the neighbor who chased the little dog across the street and who the police ignored.
Yeah.
In terms of, dealing with a noisy neighbor. And it was something that was so relatable and brought the audience in, I think, if you're watching this, with a humorous, relatable scene right before something traumatic happens. I think they did a good job of juxtaposing the darkness with bits of humor here and there.
This could have been like a super dark movie.
It could have just been dark.
It could have just been dark, but then the way they add some humor, but at the same time, I have to tell you, the acting, fantastic. Jeffrey Combs, I swear, he knocked this he knocked this thing out of the park. And Barbara Crampton, who was...
She was great.
Dr.
She
Katherine.
was a psychologist overseeing Dr. Crawford.
Psychiatrist,
after he was admitted.
Then you had Bubba Brownlee, who was Ken Corey.
Yeah.
That was the actor who played them. And he was the police officer. He felt like he was the guy that kind of kept everything light.
He did a good police officer. He didn't talk much. He didn't have a lot of speaking scenes. But, he had that nice leather jacket. It
like
really
easygoing.
But he was very firm. Hey, we got to do this. Don't do this. It was very believable, his role as a police officer. And
then you had Dr. Blouch, which is played by Carleen Purdy Gordon, and she was
she worked at the hospital, I think.
Yeah, she was the mean-spirited administrator and doctor.
Yes.
Then, of course, you had Dr. Edward Pistorius, played by Ted Sorrell.
Yeah.
Fantastic actor.
Yeah.
And, of course, you had the neighborhood lady, who was played by Bunny Summers.
It's really a small cast. When you get out up past the first 4 or 5 people, I'm thinking this could be a fun, short community theater play.
Yeah.
You only need a few scenes. The hospital, the house, maybe
in that room.
The attic with the resonator. Yeah, you can easily walk across stage between scenes and with only, 5 or 6 people act out the whole play. Yeah, I think it was brilliantly done.
And then, of course, we had Del Russell, who played the ambulance driver, and then you had Bruce McGuire, who's Jordan Fields.
Oh, yeah.
The detective guy.
And there were some other extras at the hospital.
Sure.
For various roles. They had different staff and different patients. But
let's get back to the plot.
Yeah.
So what happens is Crawford is committed to a psychiatric ward where he's treated by Dr. Katherine McMichaels. I said that's the most 1980s name.
Katherine McMichaels. Yeah.
Katherine McMichaels.
Sounds like a pop star.
Yeah. After Crawford gives his account of Ptorius' death, Katherine orders that Crawford undergo a CT scan. Man, I felt terrible. He was crying and screaming, but they're like, okay, just turn off this speaker.
I wonder if some of that is playing, because this came out in 1986, maybe there was still some unknown anxiety in terms of, some people are scared of hospital settings. Nowadays, if someone's getting a scan of some sort, no one worries about it being painful or hard. But maybe back in the mid-80s, there were people in the theater who might have thought, "Oh, this is scary. They're scanning my brain.
Yeah.
What are they going to see? This is not normal."
Yeah. So Crawford's pineal gland is enlarged and growing. Convinced of Crawford's innocence, Katherine has him released to her custody and takes him back to Pistorius' house.
Now, I disagree with that.
Resonator.
I disagree with that. I don't think she was convinced of his innocence. She was curious and saying, to prove your innocence, we have to test it. I don't think she was convinced of him. I think she was curious and wanted to test it.
I think what I take away from the film is that she is curious, not necessarily because of Crawford, but she's interested in this technology, saying, wow, this is the most cutting edge thing imaginable. Let's play around with it.
Well, when she heard graduate student in physics and the person seemed to know what he was talking about, maybe she thought, okay, well, let's investigate this further. The reason I think it's for science rather than out of faith or belief in what Crawford's saying is because after it works the first time, she says we need to test it again. Like a good scientist.
You have to do an experiment twice.
So I think she was in experiment mode. I don't think she was in, I believe Crawford, let's do what we can to help.
The other person...
I think only after it was proven, then she was on his side.
Yeah.
To help. Yeah.
I did like how they had the police officer show up. They accompanied by Detective Bubba Brownlee, who investigated Ptorius' death. Katherine and Crawford rebuild the resonator. Crawford reactivates the machine, which causes more creatures to appear along with a naked Ptorius. Ooh. His consciousness now altered and expanded. Ptorius tells a world beyond that is more pleasurable than normal reality, and that his death was a means of ascending to this realm.
Yeah.
So this technically means Ptorius will never die. I mean, he's just going to be this kind of creature in a different dimension that's in our dimension, but we can't see him.
We talked about this as it was happening during the movie, but I think the creature is something else. I think the reason it took Ptorius' form is it takes the form of the last thing it eats.
I think what happens is it takes the head and what. Okay, so we're going to go into spoiler territory.
This isn't John Carpenter, is it?
This is not John Carpenter.
No. Because it reminded me of The Thing a little bit in terms of how it was represented on the screen. But
yeah, this is definitely a David Cronenberg production here.
Oh yes,
he definitely did the body horror stuff. One of the things that I think I liked about it is this idea that there's an unknown world that we cannot see. But when this machine gets turned on, then we get to see things we've never seen before.
Yeah.
But the problem is these things that we see are vicious and they want to kill us.
In some ways, I think they're dark reflections of ourselves and of our inner desires, because there's a lot of themes around, forbidden desires. I think one reason, going back to the curiosity statement from the psychiatrist, is there might be a running theme throughout that some of our curiosity might end up bad. We're asking questions of things that we don't want to know the answer to necessarily.
It kind of reminds me of the whole trope that goes, curiosity killed the cat. Like the cat's like exploring. He's like, oh, right. And then all of a sudden it's like it goes to this area that it should never have gone to. Then it slips and falls and gets hit by a car.
Yeah, cats might naturally know to, not avoid certain things,
Well, their curiosity might cause them to do things that are really...
climb up a tree that's
like
too
really
high.
Too high, and then you have to call the fire department to go there and pick it up.
Yeah. I did that once. I called the fire department. I had a kite that got caught in the tree. And so I called the fire department, and they said, is there something alive in the tree? Is it in danger? And I said, no. And they said, is it near a power line? And I said, no. And they said, don't waste our time. And I was like, oh. I thought you were supposed to come out here and get the ladder and get my kite.
That's not how this works.
Yeah, they did not do that. Even on the non-emergency line. I called the non-emergency line, so I ended up losing a kite that day.
Wow.
Learned a lesson.
Yeah. So we're back to the plot once again. Katherine and Crawford rebuild the resonator, and what actually happens is Crawford reactivates the machine, which causes more creatures to appear along with a naked Ptorius. His consciousness is now altered and expanded.
Yes.
Ptorius tells of a world beyond that is more pleasurable than normal reality. I kind of talked about that before.
Yeah.
But then Katherine thinks the resonator could shed light on victims of schizophrenia and brain damage and suggests they turn it back on again. Even though the previous time they turned it on, Ptorius, now a creature, tried to attack them and harm them.
Ptorius.
I think what this tells us is that there's a point where we are no longer good advocates for ourselves.
Really? You got that out of it?
That's what I got, because what's happening is this woman...
with the blonde, the psychiatrist?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's happening is that she is taking unnecessary amounts of risk.
Yes.
And she's not evaluating, being like, okay, let me get this straight. If I turn this machine on, there are creatures that will come here, and they will tear us to pieces. I mean, they're just going to rip our heads off and devour them. I actually thought it was crazy that it was a big takeaway was when one of the detectives said, "Hey, so there was no blood in the crime scene, and the head looks like it twisted it off, but it sucked out everything, so it was like almost no blood."
I'm going to be a no fun Nelly for a second, and I think that what happened was something that I always ask myself in some of these horror movies, which is, in movies like Scream or something, you might think, why don't they go to the police? And I'm wondering if they have the resonator, they tried it once, so they're bought in. Brownlee, the psychiatrist, and Crawford. What was the psychiatrist's name again? You mentioned it. I'm sorry.
Dr. Katherine?
Katherine, okay. And so why didn't Katherine write a paper about it, or why didn't they take it to a more public setting with more people and study it? Instead, it had to be, oh no, we're going to figure this out tonight. Her worry is that no one would believe them.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what repeated testing would have done to get more people to believe them.
What I think it was going to do is, one, she would spot it, and then she could make some type of testimonial. The other thing I think she was really interested, and this is kind of when Dr. Catherine McMichaels is not really a good psychiatrist.
You could tell that they had a bit of a catty first encounter. They had a disagreement. The psychiatrist told the person who handles patients, "Oh, you just lock them in cages and don't interact with them," whereas I'm the psychiatrist and I interact with them a lot. Surprisingly, she says to Katherine, "Oh, but you're the psychologist who just wants to do experiments on patients and torture them," which, oddly enough, there's a scene later where that came full circle.
It's like a foreshadowing. That's what that was, really.
Good foreshadowing, but also I think, and let me know if you got this as well, or if this resonates with you. The idea of this other world is, I think, a reflection of some of the darker parts of ourselves that we don't want others to know. And so, for example, when there's the uncontrolled lust and desire in one of the scenes, there's elements of sadomasochism that come out.
Yeah.
But when you see it represented in the hospital, you see it twice. One is by the patient handler this doctor who orders the electroshock therapy on Katherine later.
Oh, she was very vindictive.
There are elements of that.
Yeah, she wanted she wanted revenge.
And then also the person who was going to administer it, they seem to be getting some sort of maybe pleasure out of it. Let me know if their smile before, it eventually didn't necessarily happen, but as they were preparing, the person seemed to be, enjoying in the situation. But that's an example of things in our society that are horrible, but we don't necessarily look at them as horrible in the moment. I'm not sure if I'm reading too much into it.
No, I think you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Let me get back to the plot.
Sure, okay.
Katherine thinks the resonator could shed light on these victims with schizophrenia brain damage.
Yes.
While Bubba and Crawford are asleep, Katherine does some sleepwalking. And she goes up. She turns the machine back on.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. And the problem is Ptorius comes back and is trying to eat her head.
Yeah, that doesn't work well. As we saw with Pistorius's body, when the monster eats the head, there's no blood
because it sucks it all out.
Yeah, but there's no head; it gets twisted off, so to speak, and then their body seems to be filled with fluid, which the detectives say early on in the movie is unidentifiable.
Yeah,
in this realm.
The pathologist doesn't know what it is. They're like, I've never seen this before. Whoa.
Yes.
But you're going back with the creatures, and I'm going to throw my 2 cents in there. And what I'm seeing here is this. It's almost like we're in Jurassic Park, but we just don't know it.
I like that analogy, yeah.
I feel like and then all of a sudden when you start to realize you're in Jurassic Park, the creatures in Jurassic Park notice you're there.
So what happens is there's, let's say, an electric field, and when the electricity goes off, suddenly we can cross over there, they can cross over here a little bit, and that door is sort of open, and then we're surprised when the T-Rex crashes.
Because what this shows us is that we're not the biggest dogs on the field anymore.
No.
When these creatures show up, you're like, I'm very small in the context. even gunfire didn't seem to really slow these guys down.
There was lots of blood splattering, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So guns helped a little bit, but
not when you have a creature from an
other
alternate dimension. Yeah.
It seems to be able to heal itself and change, and it kept showing up like any good monster would in a horror movie.
What happens here is, let's get back to the plot.
Sure.
And see here, essentially what happens is Crawford and Bubba go down into the basement to shut off the power, but encounter a giant worm-like monster which attacks Crawford.
Sure.
Bubba succeeds in shutting off the power, rescuing Crawford and Katherine, and sending Ptorius away. Bubba decides they should leave the house, which was probably the smartest idea I've seen in a horror film in a while. Hey, this place is horrifying. Let's just leave. Let's drive away. Like,
you don't have to be around
you don't
the haunted house. You know?
Exactly. It's like, no, we have to hang out where Michael Myers hangs out, okay? I know there's other places we can go, but it makes perfect sense if we want to hang out here.
And again, let me know if I'm reading too much into it.
Sure.
So, again, about this pineal gland, and then there was a lot of desire and lust that, this other world would bring about by stimulating that, right? Sometimes it was represented by coming out of their forehead.
Yeah.
Right?
It popped out, yep.
And I noticed that it was kind of phallic when it came out. It kind of would move around.
Definitely pine cone.
But,
pine cone.
Yeah, the bulb at the end was more of the pine cone. But there was also a string of probably it being connected to the brain that was also there. And of course, if you remove that from someone, it seemed to affect them. Similarly, it made me think about the worms that were very phallic in nature. And I guess I was wondering if pulling those off, the pineal gland off, it seemed to bring people back to maybe a little bit of their sensibilities. So I'm wondering if there's a comment there on the bestial nature of desire and lust versus...
See, the only issue I have with what you're saying is that...
go ahead. Yeah.
Because the pineal gland controls sleep patterns, then you're going to have some terrible sleep after they bite your pineal gland.
So, because it's sleep related, you think it's more like waking up in the sense of, like Freddy.
Yeah, you're having like a nightmare.
You're in the dream world almost, and now you're back into the awake world.
When you're asleep, the creature is taking control.
I see. See, I was thinking of the pink as maybe more of a fog or haze of how we're viewing this alternate world, So I thought of it more as desire embellished, right? The pink lighting, and I was thinking it's people's desires, sort of.
I liked how they had Jeffrey Combs get to the point where he was bald and he had that thing coming.
Oh my gosh!
And Barbara Crampton was getting on top of him and being like really being bossy on him.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna the fans of the people who are fans of these kind of sci-fi horror, mystery, body horror kind of stuff. They're gonna really enjoy this. I can tell you that.
It's
1980s feel.
It kind of reminds me.
Almost like a John Carpenter film.
Well, yeah, but also I think it was a callback to maybe even some of the earlier films before it. So this is in the 80s. And in the 60s, there was a lot of sort of titillation along with horror, There was a lot of, I would say the incredibly strange creatures who decided to stop living, died, and became mixed up zombies. With 2 exclamation points and a question mark. It's the longest movie title in history. There were scenes of like, oh no, there's this monster, but then there's also going to be some, fanfare or some fan service or something. There's going to be skimpy outfits or something.
Oh yeah.
So I think it was, and maybe it was in the mid '80s. I think it was also a callback because in the '60s. A lot of those horror films also had that, the monster would throw a damsel over its shoulder and walk to the cave or something, like an alien monster or something. I don't know, but or Creature of the Black Lagoon frequently did this, right?
Yeah.
You get someone in a big rubber suit and they pick up the damsel and walk away. So I saw some of that as sort of fan service to classic horror tropes in general. Although it was a modern take on it, right?
I like how
more adult and modern.
I definitely like how Bobby Brownlee, he tried to keep himself level-headed. I love the quote he said.
Yeah.
his quote was, "This is the biggest discovery since Dr. Van Heumen figured out that there are such things as amoebas."
Amoebas.
But here's the issue. I love what he says. The issue here is we're down here with the amoebas. Yeah. See, it's different if we're like looking in a microscope and we're looking down and we see the little amoebas. It's a totally different story if the amoeba's next to you and it's larger than you.
Oh, it's larger. Yeah, suddenly the amoeba's a giant monster.
And you're like, oh my gosh, this giant amoeba's next to me. Oh man, but that's a different perspective to look at the world in a way where this is what it looks like when you're not the biggest dog on the field.
Speaking of, and it was mentioned around that same time, speaking of perspective, back in the 1700s, there was an idea of vision called sense datum theory. And it was the idea that our eyes are sort of taking in particles of data, and that's what we're seeing, and then our mind interprets the data, and that's how we make sense of the world. There are, of course, more refined ones now of light, and the V1 through V4 for the early vision, mid, and late vision, and then cognitive penetration when we make sense at different layers of V1 through V4. But back in the 1700s, they thought of sense datum theory, and even earlier than that, in the mid-1600s, René Descartes had a different view, and they actually mentioned René Descartes in the script, saying, this third eye, or the pineal gland, showing the sort of different heat temperatures of the room in terms of how the monster was seeing.
I think the quote I always remember from Descartes is, "I think, therefore I am."
Well, yeah, there's cogito ergo sum, and that came from second meditation. Well, first Meditations in Philosophy, but book 2 in that, and that was an argument against the general skeptic that says we can't know anything. If there's a table of what we can know, then anything you put on the table is we could, for example, we can't trust any knowledge because, let's say, for example, there's a demon, right, that is tricking us into believing that we know things. And so because we cannot prove that there's not a demon tricking us, we can't know anything. Cogito ergo sum, which people translate to, I think, therefore I am, it's actually more closely translated to, I doubt, therefore I am. So what René Descartes did to counter the general skeptic is say, okay, let's assume that there is nothing on the table that I know. What can I still know? He was a rationalist. He says, just by reason alone we can know things. And the one thing that he started from is he said, okay, what if I'm being tricked by a demon into thinking I know something when I really don't know something? Well, then at least I am a thing being tricked.
Yep.
So he says I doubt, therefore I am is actually the better translation. I think, therefore I am, but think of it as I doubt, therefore I am. The fact that we can doubt our own existence means at least we know that we're a doubting thing. Because at the very kernel of us asking the question means that we're at least a thing that's asking the question.
That's what I like about Bubba Brownlee's character.
And then from there he builds off it. But in terms of the visual, Descartes did a lot of stuff. He did science, he did mathematics, the Cartesian coordinates, the XY axis. The XY is René Descartes. Cartesian coordinates. The thing about vision is, again, this is prior to sense datum theory. He thought that there was a homunculus in our mind.
It's how our mind sort of body.
It's sort of like us looking at a movie theater. He thinks that there's another sort of maybe consciousness. He had this idea of dualism separating the mind and the body, and he thought of there as being a sort of maybe extra viewer out through our eyes interpreting the data, a sort of person behind the eyeballs who literally maybe.
I always like those homunculus pictures.
Oh, the homunculus ones. Yeah, the homunculus pictures.
With the big hands and the small feet and the big face and the big tongue, but everything else proportionally sized.
That's why I think maybe some of these monsters are a part of us, but we don't see. It's supposed to be the darker side of our humanity.
That was the point
that debases our humanity.
Film.
When we notice it, it debases our humanity when we notice it.
I think that's what she was trying to say in the film, was that maybe people with schizophrenia are being tormented because they can sense these creatures around them and they're tormented by them.
Well, and it goes back to another theme of, are they really crazy? Or are they just
bad circumstances,
interpreting reality in a certain way and nobody else gets it? Or everyone else has found a way to filter out and block it. But they really see what's going on.
They see the horror.
They see the horror.
So back to the plot. now that she takes Crawford back to the hospital after, unfortunately, the detective Bobby gets eaten alive by these bugs. So they return back to she takes Crawford back to the hospital where she's evaluated for insanity and schizophrenia, which is the sad part because here she is like, oh, I'm not crazy, and then all of a sudden she says the same thing as Crawford, and you're like, no, you're going in there.
Yeah, I really thought they were just going to have her be the next person that's locked up, and then the cycle would continue. You know, I thought very Stephen King-esque, even though it was Lovecraft. I thought it would end in some sort of like, and now you're the one not being believed, and then someone else is going to say, hey, let's check out that house with her, you know, and then the cycle continues of people not being believed.
I liked how Dr. Blouch was kind of like, now you're mine. I'm going to do whatever I want with you.
Yeah, you're my patient now. So I decide.
Torture you.
First, let's shock you a bunch of times with electro. And you have to realize, only recently, I mean, in the 70s, you had lobotomies. In the 70s, I mean, Billy Milligan was The Many Minds of Billy Milligan, as you know. Actually, he lived in Athens County, and I lived right next to the asylum where he was housed a long while ago. And, you know, multiple personality disorders and DID, now called dissociative identity disorder, was very new at the time. But basically, yeah, there were asylums, there were lobotomies, and nowadays most of those are shut down. We deal with patients very differently than we used to. So I think in the mid-80s, this was also a comment on, hey, if there's someone saying crazy things, should we just slap them and shock them until they stop? Is that the right way to deal with people who are perceiving reality different?
Well, we're going to find out how they treat Dr. Katherine. As Katherine is being prepared for shock treatment by a sadistic staff member, Crawford develops an overwhelming hunger for human brains and kills Katherine's superior, Dr. Blouch.
Yeah.
Katherine escapes and drives back to the house with a bomb. A crazed Crawford follows her. Katherine places a time bomb on the resonator. Crawford attacks her. As he's about to eat her brain, she bites off his pineal gland. Which you called that out, actually.
Yeah, she bites off her pineal gland. I knew immediately.
And reverting
when the wiggly phallic thing was near the mouth, it was like, you know, it's the equivalent of castration, so to speak, to get rid of the sexualized energy from the.
So this is what happens right at the end.
Yeah.
Dr. Ptorius will reconnect and severed wires of the resonator and fixes the short circuit damage.
Wonderful.
A mutated Ptorius returns and decapitates Crawford before Ptorius can do the same to Katherine. Crawford consciousness fights for control with Ptorius, the opposing consciousness, tearing their shared body apart. Katherine escapes
that was quite a scene as well. Seeing one body
bomb explodes.
Yeah.
Destroying the resonator and killing both Ptorius and Crawford. Landing outside, Katherine breaks her leg, and the neighbors gather around her as she suffers a mental breakdown, saying, "It ate him," in between mad laughter and crying.
So to bring some sense to that last point, you saw the difference in people wanting to help her. When she was injured and she's on the ground and there was an accident, and they said, oh, what happened? As soon as she started saying, it ate them, there was this thing that, you know, as soon as she started talking crazy, so to speak, everyone's face changed of, oh, no, you're the other.
It went from being supportive to being like, yeah, you're wasting our time.
I really think there's a comment underlying this whole film of when we think people are crazy or an other, we
push them away.
Push them away, treat them like they're crazy. We treat them inhumanely. We can shock them, we can lock them up. I really think there's some of that, and it was demonstrated in that last scene as well.
Very cold and disconnected.
Yeah.
What I will say about this film,
unlike our viewers,
yeah, I do like this idea of authorities trying to do experiments and not looking out for the best for their patients.
Mm-hmm.
That illustrates this in the movie. It also illustrates this idea that I can't get over the idea over again. I keep thinking through my mind. It's the Jurassic Park that no one knows is there.
I like that idea because you're on, in Jurassic Park, just to give a little bit of context of maybe the analogy and let me know if my analogy is off. when you're in the Jeep going through the park, it's on a set rail.
Yeah.
In that film, what happens when you get out of the car and you run off? You find the sick Triceratops. You find the dangerous animals when you climb over the, when the fences are taken down and the barriers are broken between dinosaurs and humans, right?
Yeah.
But you're safe while you're on the track and in the car. And I think it's saying most of us in society are safe in the car on the track.
Good.
And when we see people out in the wild talking about Triceratopses, we go, what are you talking about? Stay away.
Yeah. One thing I would say is, what would you give this movie a score? 1, not being good, and 10 being awesome. What would you say, Dr. Frog? What is your score from Beyond?
It's close to a 9, but I'm going to have to give it an 8.5. And I say this, the pacing was fantastic. The cinematography was fantastic. The acting was fantastic. I liked the orchestra and the music. I liked a lot of things. The realisticness and the decisions that the characters made in their circumstances to me didn't make sense. I felt like some of their decisions pushed forward the plot of what happens next rather than being realistic.
Yeah.
So, for example, no one went to get help. It was always, let me go and flip the switch. Let me go and push the button.
I guess what's happened is that when you no longer have control of yourself, you're going to do crazy and ridiculous stuff.
Well, that's true, but then even when there were moments when they regained control and then they assessed what to do next, they still made bad decisions. And then put themselves in situations where they couldn't.
But I like that she came back with dynamite to blow it up.
Katherine was great, yeah. I mean, she's great. I mean, I even saw hints of Sigourney Weaver in Alien.
Yeah.
She set the timer. I thought she was going to go back up and turn off the timer in the same way Sigourney Weaver in Alien had to turn off the timer when she ran into the alien in the hallway and had to reset the detonation. It was great. She did a great job. Really took on the heroic role well.
And Jeffrey Combs, how did you think? Did you like him?
He was great as Combs. He basically had to be a punching bag that just had to be a pathetic figure for the movie. And I think that's easy to act. Some people commented, let's say, for the 11-year-old actor who was in The Sixth Sense, he kind of had to act bewildered and afraid most of the time. He kind of had one expression through the film. And so similarly, I thought Combs, through most of the film, sort of had one expression of someone being traumatized.
Yeah.
But the makeup artist as well, like the different ways that his body changes throughout the film, I think it was impressive art design, I guess, or costume design.
I would definitely say this is a good movie in the regards of that kind of genre.
Yeah,
I'm giving this a 9 out of 10.
Nice. I'm so close to a 9. I'm giving it an 8.5. But the pacing was great. It was a wonderful short story told through this movie. I think it'd be very interesting as a theater play. Yeah,
because of the consistent background.
And to be honest, the monologues and the emotions are what carry it. The characters do. Even though in theater you could represent the body horror and the blood a bit more over the top than you probably could in theater.
The only thing I'm going to say for this film is I'm giving it a 9. I think it's a great view. And
yes,
Dr. Frog, you're giving it a
8.5.
8.5. Well, overall, I think this is definitely a recommendation to check this out. And what we'll do is we'll finish up this episode and recommend this if you're into some horror, mystery, and
sci-fi horror,
and this idea of being devoured, but then becoming the thing that devours you.
It's the world that we don't look at.
Yeah, it's the place that you don't see it. It's the Jurassic Park that we don't know we're inside of.
About us. Yeah, the sick Triceratops off in the woods that we never see.
And on that note, we're going to be calling the show.
Take care.
Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you later. This is the Red Beam Podcast, New Orleans edition. Over and out.
Out.